Welcome to the Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast. I'm your AI assistant, introducing your hosts Tim Keefe and Andreas Wieman. This week, they are excited to bring you a special edition where they delve into the transformative power of data in business decision-making. Joining Tim and Andreas is a distinguished guest, Rosanne Werner, who is a pioneer in the field of data analytics. In today's episode, they will explore the critical role of data in strategic decision-making, debunk common myths about gut-driven decisions, and share insights on how to effectively harness data for organizational success. Get ready to unlock the potential of data to make smarter, more informed decisions. Let's dive in.
Hi, everybody. This is Tim Keefe with Transform CX, and welcome to another Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast. We're very excited today. This is a little bit of a special edition for us, and we've got a really exciting guest. So let me turn it over to my co-conspirator, Mr. Andreas Wieman, and get us kicked off today. What are we going to be about?
Hey, well, again, thanks for everybody for listening. And yeah, we do have a special guest today, Rosanne Werner. And what we're going to be talking about is the thrilling, all right, calm down, everybody's getting excited, right? The thrilling topic of data adoption. We're only going to, keep our normal 15-minute time box here. Otherwise, this could easily turn into probably just an hour discussion by myself, asking myself questions and extrapolating on my own answers and my own questions. So we're not going to do that this time, but I do want to tee up, Roseanne, just an opening question for you and your experience and being able to share a little bit about yourself to our listeners as well. From data adoption, here's how I think about it. And I think about the way the environment is today. A lot of leaders, influential leaders of large organizations or even, smaller organizations that are trying to be able to thrive with all of the environmental circumstances they're facing right now. I kind of think back to a quote of gut feelings are great for ordering pizza and coffee, but not for business decision making. So if you think about gut feelings and how that's been a part of business decision making and just decisiveness in general, what are your thoughts on incorporating data and being able to make better data-driven decisions across organizations that are maybe disparately broken out or a little bit complex in nature?
No, that's a great question. Thanks for having me, Tim and Andreas. It's really great to be part of such a great podcast. And it's a great question. Like with the amount of data that's been generated, what they say 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years. And we've seen the boom of emerging technologies such as AI. It's crucial for companies to help their employees to sift through the noise in terms of the data that they need to use for decision making and the data that helps them answer the key problems that they need to solve, the key business problems that they need to solve. And it's understanding, what the true value is from that data. So managing that data as an asset. So how do we use the right data for the right decision making?
Right.
And you mentioned about gut feeling.
Mm-hmm.
The gut feeling, I feel we shouldn't disregard the human expertise element that can work really well with making decisions with data. What the data tells you, but it's also a combination of what the data tells you plus the human expertise that will help that data-driven decision making.
Yeah, great. The intuition and the experience, right? And so like Tim, I don't think we've ever talked about that on our podcast before. We're always like, just go with your gut. You know what you're doing. Just go with your gut. What is this? A bunch of, I's and O's in this spreadsheet. Yeah, don't worry about any. No, I'm kidding. Obviously,
But
we're big promoters of that. And Tim, what do you think on that topic?
well, no, but I think it's an interesting point. We've talked about this at different times in the past because data, particularly over the last 10 years, and when we started with this big data conversation 20 years ago, and I'm really dating myself, Roseanne, so I do this all the time. But we start off with like, oh, we're going to hire data scientists to look at these large data structures that we're building within organizations. So what do? We go out and hire all the PhDs from Stanford with applied physics degrees who can't get a job. So they're going to now be a data scientist. Brilliant people, much, much, much smarter than I'll ever be. But they're looking at data structures or data relevance and all the other things. Again, I'm not the data scientist, but they're looking at it in what I would call an inexperienced, sterile way. And I remember working with a company that had a data analytics group, And we had a huge client, one of the biggest payroll companies in the world as a client, had come to me because I had the relationship there on some work we had done on the customer facing side. And one of their back office groups said, hey, we've got all of these things that are coming at us. They're trouble tickets and they're requests for services. We need help to understand how do we better manage this in a way that allows us to use fewer resources to make sure we deliver what we need to for our client. Okay, good question, right? Like that makes sense. I want to optimize efficiency. What are the, operators would go, what are the handful of things that really drive the machine? And the answer is sometimes is not obvious, and also is tied up in understanding what it is I'm doing. Right. So we're in this very embarrassing meeting, and I'll say right up front, it was embarrassing. We're in Los Angeles, and here these data scientists here are the key things that if you could slice these things in half would have the biggest impact on your workload. And the client just sat there and said, quote unquote, and I'll do this but they said, really? No shit. We know that. Like, we're not idiots. Tell me how to cut that in half is the problem. And that's where the data scientists go, well, I don't know. I mean, to me, it's just a number, or it's a critical number because it's driving a lot of other things and is clearly related. But I don't understand what's behind it. I don't understand that these are specific requests for copies of critical tax return forms and then you go, okay, well, the operator and me and Andreas and I would both go, well, crap. Make that really available so they don't have to take a call. We'll do a proactive push out to every customer and say, here's a secure link. If you need to re-download the copy of your W-2 tax form, here's how you do it. But because they weren't operators and the client threw us out of the room before we could get to an operational discussion, it was kind of bad. But I think what you're getting at is really important, is it's the relevance of the data. I mean, data by itself is a beautiful thing, right? Like, I love math, but it's what's relevant to the problem. And again, sometimes that's where you need, when I say gut instinct influenced by experience, I think has more value. But somebody who doesn't have the experience and just reacting can almost create more problems in a way.
I always say, like, data doesn't speak for itself. And I come from a finance background.
I love that one. I love that.
And so, like, if data speaks for itself, we'll be drinking 8 glasses of water a day, doing our 10,000 steps a day, we'll be sleeping 8 hours every night. But data doesn't speak for itself. And I like the point of bringing the insight from the data that is relevant to the context of the business problem you're trying to solve. And I like how you touched upon the emotion side of what drives decision making. It's that bit that I always go, that you've got the data, but our brains are wired to make decisions based on emotions first, and then we find the logic to back it up. So with decisions based on data, I would say you need to use the insights from data, grab the relevance of it, and tap into that kind of emotional connection on why your audience need to drive a certain action or decision based on the combination of that data, the emotion, and the why.
Yeah, the why is really important. I mean, Andreas, jump in here. Otherwise, I'm just going to start swimming laps because this is so engaging for me.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say go for it, but yeah, I know what that means too, and I also got to taper myself because it's another passionate topic. But I think what Rosanne was saying too is highly relevant, because what she just said, to action that in real life, you're talking about, let's use the terminology, data scientists, right? Data analysts. You're bringing them together with the business unit owners and frontline workers, and what you get to experience is this collaboration of knowledge and business, let's say business knowledge, right? And then you have the data side. And so how do you merge those together, and how do you cross, or like almost alt skill, like we were talking about last week, Tim? How do you alt skill enough to where each side understands it? So the business side, that's under pressure to perform to the business expectations, or if you're a publicly traded company, to street expectations. Well, how can they converse with their peers on the data side to get what they need to be successful and act in the business? And then adversely, or on the other side, I should say, how do they communicate to the data side? So the data guy, the data team, I don't know, I'm throwing like different names out here now. The data analyst side, the data scientist side, understand what is the business outcome that is the hypothesis
Yeah.
or the destination. That's like fun. If you embrace how to merge those together and not treat them like siloed departments like they've been treated in, for decades, I think the organizations that kind of crack that nut first, they're going to see a highly accelerated adoption of not just data-driven decision making, but all of the capabilities and other options you would have from a Gen AI perspective and help you make sense of that data. But first, that collaboration has got to occur. And I think the sooner organizations get there, the more fruit it's going to bear. And I think that trust is going to build up and it's going to exponentially
Yeah.
spread positively throughout organizations.
Well, I think you're getting at something that is really fundamental about, let's call it business education, right? Traditionally, business education, and again, I feel like I went to get my MBA back. We were still carving it in stone, probably at this point. But you think about what are the skills that any leader, right, in an organization may need to be effective in their job, right? And one of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about is leadership in general. We have another book coming out around the challenges of leadership and what that means. But there are skill sets that are now inherently required that traditionally, quote unquote, executives didn't do, right? Like it wasn't that long ago. My father was a CEO at an insurance company. He had a secretary that he dictated letters to, that typed the letters that were brought to him. But nobody does that anymore. Well, there's probably some people who do it, but we all do our own thing, right? Or we have Gen AI write the letter for us, and we kind of look at it and go, "Oh, that's good enough," and then we hit send. And all of that is okay. But then we start to say things like, "Oh, well, you should at the very least know how to use a spreadsheet." Okay, and now how many people that are leaders are really beyond very basic skills at spreadsheet? Some are better than others. So that's a starting point of being able to use analytical tools in your work. Now we're starting to ask people to understand what Gen AI tools are. Some are taking them, jumping on them faster, and maybe aren't using them effectively, but they're using them. But I think there's this thing of how do we make the understanding of data an inherent part of being an effective leader, in that if you were to look at a training program, let's say MBA of 2025. So if I think of a master's of business administration would be just a framework of tools that prepare someone to be a senior leader in an organization, that they can look both tactically and strategically at how an organization is going, pivot, all the good stuff. What would be the 10 or 15 core skills they need to be effective in that job? And I think number one is probably data analytics 101, what we used to call statistical analysis, which of course is evolved because now we can look at the entire data set. So, I mean, thinking about that, if you were out there and you could wave a magic wand and say, hey, in your role, and as you how to try and make data this inherent tool set, how would you approach it? Or what do you think about it? Or am I just completely
Yeah.
losing my mind, which is pretty common?
I'd like to tie what you both said in terms of, Andreas, you mentioned about the data teams. And what I'm seeing is that the hard technical skills isn't enough in this day and age. You can be really good at your technical skills, but it's really the soft skills, the collaboration with the business team to really understand the business challenges that they're facing, and then using the access to the various data points that they have to help the business solve the problems. But there's also the other side of the leadership business teams in terms of what are the right questions that are asked of the data, so that that kind of domain expertise that they have that can help the data and tech teams to understand more about, okay, well, we've got this data from this source, we've got the internal and external data, how do we combine them and ingest them properly to really answer the question? So it's really that soft collaboration skills from the technical teams to really help embrace with the business teams and their domain expertise to really drive that driving force on what are the right decisions to make with that data, because of those combination of the expertise on both sides.
No, I think that's right on. I often think sometimes that we get tied up in the question asking. And Again, I'm very much an operations guy, and I kind of trying to drive down to that most businesses think about a couple of things, right? They think about growth, adding new customers. So that's usually sales and the related activities around sales. Then there's the activity of keeping the customers I have, because recurring revenue requirements and all the things that make up a business. And then there's a third bucket that can be a variety of things, usually compliance, security, regulatory, et cetera. But for me, I'm always kind of like from a consulting perspective, to your point, it's like, okay, that's all great. We got all this stuff. Can you answer this question? Like, for example, maybe the question is, how do I sell more effectively? And then the question is, well, that's going to be tied back to everything from where do you do your campaigns? Where do you do your messaging? Do you have the right profile for the customer? How do I know I've had the right profile? And that's where data can help you frame that up so that you can start to have data influence conversations other than, hey, this is my favorite conversation of all time is, our customers are old, so they only want to call us. And I go, yeah, there's no data ever to support that statement, but we hear it all the time.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, I think I love what you're saying in that it kind of, to your point, you did a great job of bringing two knuckleheads together into a more coherent statement. It's, do we know the question that is relevant to the problem? And this is where data scientists will go, I don't know, right? I don't know the contact center business, or I don't know retail, I know data. And the retailer will go, I can tell you after 25 years that what you're saying doesn't work that way because, of whatever. But that's that gut, those soft skills and that experience coming together against the cold, hard sterility of data. Now, of course, data isn't always sterile either, because, sometimes data can be complete crap, but we have to know that as well and bringing those
Yeah.
together.
Hygienic data. Yeah, Roseanne, I think it would be, I would love to like get your closing thoughts on this, because I think what Tim just said is a pretty good practical approach. And what I took out of all the several words that he just said, if I narrow that down and say, look, if you're going to bring both sides, like we were talking about earlier, let's say the data analyst side and the business side together, and you're merging the gut instinct and the experience and the human factor, I think that's a really, really important part that a lot of people don't like intertwine together, the humanity and capabilities of enabling people in collaboration. I'm a huge, huge advocate for that. And then we can go into the whole habit formation and routine establishment. That's a whole nother podcast unto its own. But building that all together makes people feel a lot better and trust each other a lot more. And when people have a high degree of trust, I think stuff gets done more accurately in a quicker time frame. But when we're talking about this large ambiguous topic, right? We'll have subsequent podcasts on more granularity topics. But when you say you have the data side and you have the business side, and they're coming together, and I think the example Tim gave was kind of start small, start on something that's very narrowly focused, and allow them autonomy to figure it out together. Kind of give them guardrails for that they need to stay within, but enough autonomy to collaborate, work together, and then ask those questions. Let the business side ask the data side the business questions and say, what can you tell me about this? I don't believe this is true. I've never seen this in my 25 years of experience. Show me the data that corroborates with your hypothesis of what the data is telling you, and then we'll figure that out together. Now, I just went on for like a 10-minute rant there. Hopefully all that made sense, but like what are your thoughts on bringing those kind of both sides together on a more narrowly kind of focused topic to see some results and build that kind of trust, to have a good adoption and culture that kind of starts and then spreads out through the organization?
I like the I like the whole start small and something that you can test, improve, and follow it up with, okay, well, what worked well, what didn't work well, and what more information or context could we have given each other to understand each other's strengths and play off each other, to drive the business decisions forward. I feel the acknowledgement and building that trust between the two camps becomes one camp. But I think it's starting that small use case that is proven, so that it builds that trust between the two teams to then go, okay, well, we've been able to tackle this question. How do we build on that in terms of
Right.
asking the right questions, bringing in the domain expertise and what soft skills to then enhance from the business team to do better next time. I think that starting small and reiterating and improving is really key.
Yeah, I think you'd get violent agreement from both of us in that that's the way you build success. I mean, this is really, really exciting, Rosanne, to get an opportunity to spend time with you on this topic. And just to expand on it, we are probably 3/4 of the way of writing a Stop Doing Stupid Stuff book on data analytics and how they get implemented. Would love to get maybe your first thoughts on once we have a draft ready for reading. But this whole area is really, really important. And we see, if we were to build a branch off what we've been doing here, to me, this ability to effectively identify data, understand the data, right? The quality of the data, the integrity of the data, its usability across multiple reporting structures, which we've done a lot of work with our clients on. And then to the next point is, how does it become operationally real without it being multiple teams, right? Like as an operations lead, I should be as comfortable asking the questions and understanding the responses and at the same time bringing my data partners along so they start to understand my operational challenges. If we're doing that, then to your point, we're no longer different teams. We're sharing, we develop a shared game plan or even being on the same pitch. That's one of the things I always struggle with is like, because, and Andreas and I talk about this about a lot, which is how are you measuring success? And if it's not tied, if not everybody's tied to the same goal, we can all say we did a great job, but then at the end of the day, the organization is not getting what they need, whatever that might be. So,
yeah, it's like having that same hymn sheet to sing off, that we're both singing the same songs.
I'd say for the same game sometimes. I feel like you've got, Aussie rules, football, and field hockey all going on at the same time, and everybody's saying they're winning, and you go, I'm not sure, but that's, anyway.
Love it.
Agreed. Awesome.
All right. Well,
we
go ahead.
Yeah, Rosanne, we appreciate you joining us. Usually it's just Tim and I kind of going back and forth, so it's nice to have a third back and forth to have this great conversation with. And Rosanne Werner is the Chief Executive Officer of Accelerate IQ. Fantastic name, by the way. Fantastic name. Check out BalanceWise IQ, Scorecard IQ as well. A couple of software products from Transform CX. So naming convention is spot on. But Accelerate IQ, we definitely appreciate you in the just great conversation we've had. Usually it's Tim and I going back and forth trying to vie for the microphone. So it's nice to kind of give that back and get some insightful expertise and different angles that we're not covering.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Awesome.
Very
Thanks,
much
everybody.
so. You have a great rest of your week and enjoy the holiday season.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye-bye.